Boom. I always try to end right on time at 9 o'clock. Good morning, Levada.
Good morning.
How is it up in the north?
It's hot.
It's
I
hot
walked,
here too.
I wasn't expecting that. The airport was freezing cold. And I walked out and I said, "Oh, it's gonna be cold out here." No, I literally had to take my jacket off. It
Huh.
was burning up. So it's supposed to cool down this weekend. We'll see.
We'll see. We'll see. Well, thank
Hmm.
you for joining me today. I don't think the company's really had a chance to meet you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys.
That's okay. But you are our regional president and the Pensacola market. What towns does that cover, just for us for referral purposes?
So it's better almost by counties because of Scambia and Santa Rosa. There's so many little townships in all of that it's easier to go by the county. Mostly Pensacola, Pace, Milton, Navarre, Gulf Breeze. Um, so sometimes Fort Walton.
Okay. And that's all within like an hour drive of you?
Yeah, pretty much.
I've got a puppy chained to my ankle because I can't trust her in my house. So
Oh,
she's moving around. Hey, get over here. It's in your bed. She's discovered I have mulch in my planters in the house in the pots, and it's fun for her to take the mulch out and spread it all over the house.
yes, it is. Because
So
it gives you something to do, though.
yeah, because I don't need anything else to do. It's all
No,
good.
nothing,
All
nothing.
right. So you're in Pensacola. How many agents do you have working with us now?
So right now, I think we have 11.
Okay. So you're
Mhm.
building a market up there.
Working on it.
And I put in my note this morning that you are in the last 12 months, you've got 56 closed transactions for just over $18 million of
Wow.
production. Pretty impressive, right?
Thank you.
And you don't have a big team. You have an
No, sir.
assistant that helps you do stuff.
She's licensed though. She started as my assistant, and I never wanted a team, but we kind of have a different situation. I don't call her my team. I more call her my partner because she does handle the license part of it as well. So she just came here from Atlanta and she didn't really know anybody, and I really had to have help because I can't keep up and be a mom and a wife, and I'm still pretty active at our association, and I also didn't want to shortchange my agents on the managing side.
Right.
So
Very good.
yep.
Yes. 56 closings a year is more than one a week. And that doesn't count the ones that fall through and the ones that, the other stuff you got to do with. So, you're dealing with dozens of transactions a week. Well, not
Yes.
dozens, but multiple transactions a week, not just one. All right. Well,
Yes,
you and I
sir.
were talking the other day about just some of the crap that goes on. When you're doing that many transactions, you come across a lot of agents that are not very good. They make a lot of mistakes. They try to take the easy way out. And you and I were talking about not taking the easy way out. And it's a little bit harder, creates a little bit more work.
Mhm.
But we were talking about the as is contract versus the regular contract. So why don't you
Well,
share your
yeah.
perspective on that?
So actually, there's a lot of updates to the residential standard FAR bar that I don't think a lot of people realize. And if you go through and realize if you're selling a house that has any type of leak in the property at all, you do
Mhm.
not need to use the standard FAR bar. It clearly states the house has to be clear of leaks, free of leaks.
Ah,
So yeah, did not know that. We were reading it, updating it one day, and some of the verbiage changed. So if you have a property that has any type of issues, I would use the as is. One of the things that I've discovered lately, I do not like the addendum, the right to inspect cancel addendum, because I don't like the verbiage when you're presenting it to a seller that says that a buyer can cancel for any reason. My problem with that is that the buyer can come in and say, "Oh, Levade, I just don't like the paint color," and now you're off the market 2 weeks. And up here, or well, I'm sorry, at home, I'm not at home. We're at 65 days on the market, and we've got the most inventory we've had in over a year. So you're really nervous about taking a house off the market because what we're seeing is buyers are really wishy-washy. They change their mind. They're doing it to the lenders too. They'll come into the lender, they'll get approved for 500,000. I only want to spend three. Well, they start looking at houses that are 300,000. Oh, that's not what I want. Then they go back and they're trying for more than 500,000. They don't know what they want. They're afraid to spend money, but when they realize that values haven't fell as much as everyone expects, then they're kind of back to maybe I'll just go back with what I originally said. So what I have learned and probably need to get with Kathleen long on is some verbiage that would protect the buyer's earnest money without making it look like they're just going to cancel because they don't like the paint color.
mhm.
Because the standard FAR bar, when you have agents or a broker that I'm currently dealing with, and crazy is the only word that I have, that she thinks that she can manipulate the wording of the contract to keep a buyer's earnest money, even if they have a loan denial within their financing contingency period.
Mhm.
It's been to the point we have an attorney involved, and the title companies tried to call the Navy federal lender, who actually Navy Fed violated the buyer's rights and told the listing broker that the house appraised without their permission. Um,
Mhm.
and the title company got involved. They've overstepped, and the listings agents overstepped. It's been very interesting. And what I've realized in the last 2 months is I don't think that the FAR contract has any teeth. You telling somebody, oh well, you're gonna have to go call an attorney. No, you shouldn't have to call an attorney. The contract is very clear.
Mhm.
But when you're
Well,
dealing
the
with,
contract is very clear, but it's also very wimpy.
yes,
It used
yes,
to be, you've been doing this long enough. You remember the old versions of the contracts where we had to
mm-hmm,
provide written loan commitment by a
hmm,
period of time. Well, they no
yes,
longer have that in there anymore.
mm-mm,
Now it's simply up to the buyer to say, I got my loan commitment or I didn't.
mm-hmm,
And they
correct.
don't have to prove anything. And if they say they didn't get it and they say it within the time period, they
Mhm.
get their money back and they can go on.
Well, and one of the things though is that this listing broker's done, she basically manipulated and bullied the lender from Navy Fed into telling her what the appraisal was, because she used the contract terminology of he has to keep them apprised of the loan process. Well, that's not your business.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, another issue is the financing contingency on the contract doesn't cover appraisal. You have to have an appraisal addendum, period.
Correct.
And a lot of people don't realize that. And the problem is you have all these brokerages that want to grow, they want to add people, but they aren't training the people. And that's what you're seeing a lot of, because all you still have new agents coming in. Every month that I'm on the board of the association, every month we're still adding 100 real estate agents.
Breck is adding 8,000 people taking the test every month. Right now is the average in Florida.
Mm-hmm. I don't, this is one of the hardest times in real estate, even if you're an experienced agent.
And Florida has more licensed real estate agents than any state in the country, more than
Mm-hmm.
California, more than Texas.
Yes,
It's crazy.
it
All
is
right, so let's
crazy.
talk about some of these things. So would you say the majority of your business is based on buyer side or listing side transactions?
Probably more listing side, but
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, I have repeat clients
Of course.
that just pop up out of nowhere that will send me their kid. I've got a client right now that I helped them with. They were a buyer, but now they're going to be a seller, and they're buying again. And I think the biggest thing that I'm hearing from everyone lately on a lot of the Zooms is, how are you staying in front of those clients? If you want the listings, most likely you're going to start with buyers. That's just how it goes. You're going to
It
have
is
to put the time in with them. As a new agent, to get a listing, you're not ready. Until you can truly understand the value of properties, you're not ready.
very challenging. All right. So if you're representing the sellers, and this is why I have a hard time answering questions. Like a lot of times agents will write me a question in an email and I will phone them back because they
Mm-hmm,
can't give me enough details.
mm-mm.
I had a salesman out yesterday. I was looking at some pretty cool shit, permanent Christmas lights,
I was
right?
looking at that. Is it expensive?
It's yeah, it's not cheap, but
Okay.
it's better than going up on a ladder
Completely
24
with
feet
you.
in the air at 56 years of age. So,
Yes,
and it's
understood.
really cool for all year long and it
Mm-hmm,
lasts forever. Anyway, the guy's going through the benefits with me and what you're taling about. He goes, Craig, when you text me, I'm probably going to call you back because we have questions to go through. And I went through the
mm-hmm,
whole 73855 NLP discussion with him. And it turns out he has 7 daughters and they're all from 23 to 5.
mm-hmm,
And he said all they do is text and text and text. And we had this whole conversation about you really can't effectively communicate
mm-hmm,
when you're only using 7% of the words.
mm-hmm.
So when agents call me on this, I pick up the phone and I call them back and get more questions. Like number one, who are we representing? Because if I'm representing the buyer, I'm going to act totally differently than if I'm representing the seller, right? Not totally
Mm-hmm.
differently because I want the outcome to be the best for my client at the time. So what case would you use an as-is contract versus a regular contract?
It would depend on the condition of the home. Me, it's
Mm-hmm.
always about the condition of the home. And
Mm-hmm.
you always have to be ready to explain to your buyer that you just presented an as is offer to the seller. If you go back and it's not a major issue, you've basically, in my experience, you're going to upset them because you're basically offered them something and you lied.
Right.
You basically encourage them to take your offer with a lie. And as a listing agent, that's one of my most aggravating things. If you send me an as-is contract, I'm going to pick up my phone and I'm going to say, we will not make any repairs. The sellers won't make any repairs. It's not going to happen, because at the end of the day, most agents are being taught by their brokerages, oh yeah, just slip an as is. They'll think that you're going to work out and then you can renegotiate. No, they don't have to renegotiate with you.
No, I don't.
Period.
We actually have a clause in dot loop clauses
Hmm.
that says, it doesn't mean anything, but it clarifies the point. It says buyer agrees that buyer's inspection is for buyer's education only, and the seller has no obligation to make any repairs. So it's kind of like, I'm telling you right now, don't screw with me. So
Yeah.
that's a nice little clause that's in there. If you've seen it or not, but it's a good one to
Mhm.
kind of slap a buyer into place, saying, hey, don't go renegotiate.
Mm-mm.
You know, the seller has a right to cancel or
Mhm.
counter with a higher price. And that's what I would do.
Mhm.
It's just
Yeah.
that you said it perfectly. I use that word lie all the time.
It is
You
a lie.
offered me 475 as is.
Mhm.
And I considered that. And at 475 as is, I'm willing. Now, putting on a new roof at 475 is not as is. But I'll put the new roof on, but now it's 500. You know?
Mhm.
So that's kind of good.
Well, and my thing is, if you need to make sure you know about the roof. I just had one that was a shingle over shingle. I didn't realize it at the time. And the sellers did not disclose it to the buyer. They said the shingles were replaced. Shingle over shingle is not replacing shingles.
Mhm.
All it does is cover up all the problems. And that was the biggest hang up in this offer that we're still trying to get the buyer's escrow money back on. And I think a lot of times you have to, and I've been reminding myself of this. When I came up in this business, I was always told you need to be a single agent, single agent. So, okay, so Craig, I'm going to list your house as a single agent. I'm going to work for you, period.
Mhm.
Well, then my other client wants to see it. And then I shift to a transaction broker. And I think at the end, you end up making your clients feel that, oh, so you said you're working for me, but now you're not.
Mhm.
So one of the things I started doing is, like you said, we're just transaction brokers all the time. And so I've had to change my verbiage that it's not my clients,
Right.
basically we have to work together to either get the money back, cancel it out, get the house back on the market, but we can't, it's not the same. But that allows you to deal in facts, and you have to constantly keep emotions out of this industry.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know if you know much about our certified pre-loved home process. It's this concept we came up with years and years ago when Lexus came out with certified pre-owned Lexus,
Hmm.
right? And they could actually charge more for a used car because the Lexus dealership stood behind it because they ran it through their quality inspection process. So one of the things I've been teaching for a long time, ALI agents don't take me up on it, is certified pre-loved homes. Get the seller to perform an inspection up front and either disclose the problems they found or repair the problems they found to bring confidence in the buyer's mind.
Hmm.
Because you just mentioned you get 65 days on market now,
Hmm.
and that makes buyers a little bit nervous, right? And what else
Or they
happens is,
they think they can get more for their money. They're going
yeah,
to come in
they
under
can do
price.
it. Mhm.
Yep.
But what also happens is as more properties come on the market and they have these loosey-goosey contracts they can cancel for any reason,
Yes.
they'll cancel the one they put in because the new one came on down the street.
Hmm.
That's almost like dirty pool, right?
It is.
So that's why the
Well.
pros like you limit your time periods,
Hmm.
right? You're going to have an as is inspection period. I'm going to give you 5 days. I'm not
Hmm.
going to give you 14 days
No.
because it gives you too much time to be non-committal.
Well, what I love is I'm going to need 21 days inspection period, and we're going to close on day 22. That's really
Yeah.
cute. That's not going to happen.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not going to take the house off the market for 3 weeks for you to come back and cancel. Oh, we
Right.
wouldn't do that. Yeah, you would. You forgot that you tried to do it to me 3 months ago, and you did it to other realtors. I think the biggest thing that I like about these buyer broker showing agreements, touring agreements, these compensations, you have to pick up the phone and talk to the other agents now. You have to have relationships with agents in your market,
Mhm.
because if you have a problem with an agent in their brokerage, you have an ear now to bend.
Mhm.
I just had it happen on a house I went to close. I showed it. I'm looking at the roof. You can see the shingles are curling. No, I'm not a roofer, but I've actually done roofing before. I was a single mom and I had a roof leak and I had to fix it. That was before I had just started in real estate. I just got my license. I was doing BPOs to survive. Um, But the hardest times of my life, those BPOs, I mean, I've probably done 3,000 BPOs in the first 3 years of my real estate career, but it taught me values and it taught me what to look for. So life experiences, you have to rely on them. But going back, he's like, "Oh yeah, no, the roof is good. It's literally only 10 years old." I said, "That I understand what you're saying, but it's 3 tab shingles." I said,
Yeah.
the lifespan of those is a lot less." And a couple other things came up, and I have good friends with who he partners with sometimes. And I called her. I said, "Hey, I need to bend your ear." And I start talking to her. She's Levate, I got you.
Mhm.
Those relationships happen when you pick up the phone. They don't happen with text message. They don't happen with email because we all put our personal feelings attached to the text messages and emails.
Yeah. I just said to the guy yesterday, I said, the mood of the recipient determines
Hmm.
the tone of the message. If
Hey,
I'm
and yeah,
pissed off mood, I'm going to take the
yeah,
pissed off message. Right.
yes.
Let's talk about BPOs
Um,
because a lot of agents don't know what BPOs are. So back in the foreclosure days, after the
mhm,
2005 boom, where anybody could qualify for any loan and buy houses they couldn't afford, and then the
mhm,
rates went up and they adjusted and people couldn't afford their homes, there was a massive, massive foreclosure
mhm.
crisis. And the
Yes.
lenders were all over the country, not just Florida, all over the country, were faced with big, big, big loan defaults,
Mhm.
and they had to take these houses back. And they didn't know what houses were worth because the values had fallen so far. So a lot of agents got certified to do broker price opinions, a BPO. And I know a lot of agents that made a lot of money. What were they paying back then? Like
It
75?
was, yeah, about $100. And I basically had an agent that started doing it, and she said, "If I don't have time, would you be interested in this?" Because I was working underneath a broker associate in my office who did a bunch of foreclosures, and he'd been doing real estate for 30 years, and he didn't want to do them anymore. So he paid me on the side to do his because he needed them for actual listing purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that taught me value. When you start seeing that constantly, and you're always looking at numbers and adjustments, it just makes it easier. And Tracy, as Tracy said, she's like, "It's a lot of work." They are a lot of work, but it also teaches you a lot. And when you're starting out and you don't have anything, it's
Mm-hmm.
$100 you didn't have.
Well, if you did
Um,
3,000 $100 a piece, that's $300,000 in a couple of years. That's not too shabby.
that's $3,000, but yeah, at $100. But I mean, I'll take your math any day.
Isn't
There,
three
yeah,
3,000 times 100?
I think so, isn't it?
300,000. Yeah, it's
Oh,
300,000.
okay. I don't know. I'm drinking tea because I have a sinus infection and I'm in Boston and I'm not feeling good. So, as I told you yesterday, I'm running on like 3 hours. I'm just not sleeping here.
Wow.
I'm looking at Lauren's comment about the financing period, and I would love your opinion on this because I have a different opinion. Um, on the financing period, I make sure that I count out from the day I make the offer to the day that it closes. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you have the buyer and the buyer ends up having an issue and they cannot get their loan, they lose their earnest money if you do not cover them till the day of closing.
Mm-hmm.
And she's talking about a 20-day period for a 30-day close. It needs to be 30 days. That financing period should match your time, your exact days. And I
Well, I
think a
think it
lot of,
depends on who you represent. I
right.
always say, I want the seller to feel comfortable that the buyer is not going to cancel the day before closing because the seller has to turn off the utilities, has to turn
Mhm,
on the new utilities, has to organize
mhm,
the movers, has to be packed and ready. The house has to be broom swept clean. And
mhm,
if the buyer yanks out the day before closing, then the sellers did a whole lot of work
mhm,
and they're going to be pissed,
mhm,
right? The buyer
mhm.
should know in advance because of the way the loan commitment is written, a buyer can cancel up until the loan commitment date. For
I
what you
mean, yeah, I'm more referring to buyer side. I mean, I just had one on Beechwood that they canceled 3 days before, and their loan commitment dates were off, and that's not my problem. But on the
right.
buyer side, a lot of people don't realize that you need to cover your buyer to the day of closing. But that's because,
Yeah, that's why I said it depends on who you
yeah,
represent.
yeah,
Representing the buyer, I want
hmm,
to give wiggle room to leave and not be
hmm,
damaged. If I'm going to represent the seller, I want to make sure the buyer is committed prior to my
hmm,
seller committing to their
yep,
move. So it really does make a difference as to who
hmm,
you're representing. But then it becomes a fair issue too,
yes,
right? Because really, it's a lot to ask a seller to pack up and move out
hmm,
and then be at sufferance with the contract.
hmm. Well, and the thing comes down that only covers on financing. If they walk, that's not financing. Because you
Well,
should have that loan commitment. If you think about it, the title company should 3 days before be trying to set everybody up because they should have that final CD.
oh yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, I think we're still getting lost in the loan commitment part, though. There is no longer a loan commitment required in the FAR bar contract.
No,
It's up to the buyer to say, I have
Mhm.
loan commitment or I don't. And
but you
if,
can request it.
oh, you
You
can
can,
request one.
yep, yep.
Yeah. What they get is a clear to close,
Mhm.
which triggers the sending of the,
CD,
yeah, the
closing it,
closing
yep.
disclosure, the 3-day closing
Mhm,
disclosure. So that's what we really need to be watching for. But
mhm.
that's why, I don't know if you've really paid attention to our critical date timeline. That was a brainchild. I sold a lot of property back in the day. It was a big assemblage. And every seller had their own attorney, and I was the buyer's broker.
Mm.
And every time we executed a contract, the attorney wrote me a letter. Dear Mr. Beggins, pursuant to the contract, this is what we think are the important dates.
Hmm.
Your initial deposit is due on this date. Your additional deposit is due on this date. Your feasibility period is over on this date. Closing will be this date. Your financing period is up on this date. And I'm like, holy shit, there's a lot of stuff to keep track of. Right.
Mhm,
And I had 10 different sellers with 10 different
mhm.
contracts, 7 different sets of rules. I said, man, this is good. This would be like a cool thing to amend to a real estate transaction. So every time the Florida bar changes, I go through the Florida bar and say, okay, the initial deposit is due 3 days after acceptance. I always like an additional deposit after the end of the inspection period. So that's a critical
Hmm.
date. And then we tell the buyer your loan approval period is up here. We also tell the buyer they've got 20 days to get their insurance. And if we don't play with that one, it's a big deal for us down here now in Tampa Bay, because insurance is a big deal. And if for flood insurance, you get an automatic out. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, if you check the critical date timeline, it's in .loop. And there's another way we can do it automatically too. Jimmy can talk more on that. But it's just a great way to tell the buyer, here's your responsibilities. Tell the seller, here are your rights and obligations. And then it goes into all the other stuff they have to do. We do a class on that again soon.
I'll have to look for that because I usually try to create an email with all of those dates because,
Mhm.
for example, I've just got a contract, me and Darlene Langley did on Marcus Point Boulevard. The listing agent sent us the counter offer back on Friday, but we did not get the full executed standard FAR bar contract until Saturday, Sunday. So what
Mhm.
happens then? Well, your days that starts when your inspection period starts. And so your executed is not when you get the counter offer back, it's when you get the entire contract back.
Yeah,
And by putting all that in an email, it clearly communicates to everybody that this is what we're doing. And clear communication is everything.
agreed. Yeah, and if you ever, we don't typically go to court over things like this, but there's a saying in the legal institution world, it's the preponderance of evidence.
Mhm,
So if you communicate to the broker that you believe the effective date is Monday
mm,
and they don't protest it,
mhm,
then if the judge was in front saying, hey, wait a minute, you were put on notice, it's Monday. You
correct.
didn't contest it, it's Monday.
Mhm,
Right. So that's why I like to be the one proposing these dates.
mhm.
And then we have something concrete to go back and look at.
Craig, one of the things I would really like to see a class on, and if I've missed it, I apologize.
Mhm.
I don't get on every Zoom. I will be extremely honest, I don't. But I am literally from the time my feet hit the floor, I'm running 90 to nothing. I have 2 little ones. I mean, I'm managing, I'm also still producing. It's a lot.
Mhm.
But the escrow and learning when it should be released, a demand is made, what is to happen after that, that's really a class that needs to happen because it's something that most of us in our careers don't have to deal with until you have to deal with it.
Right.
And at that point, it does come to an attorney, but you need to be able to explain the process and understand how it's going to affect your client at the time.
Well, there's a lot of, like, I do it real quick. There's a lot of confusion around earnest money deposits
Mhm,
because as real estate agents, we go to real estate school and we
mhm,
learn about escrow disbursement orders.
mhm,
Right. An escrow disbursement order is when the broker is holding escrow. Right. We can rely on the Florida Real Estate Commission. We can file an escrow disbursement order, and the real estate commission will take their sweet time, but they'll come back with an order and tell the broker, do this. And then it
mhm,
absolves the broker of any liability because we're given by a third party.
mhm.
But 90%, 95% of all brokers now do not hold escrow. So the question is, who is the escrow agent?
Title
Right?
company. Mhm,
Title company. So, and that's where it becomes a problem because every title company has their own procedures
mhm,
in the event of an escrow dispute.
mhm,
I can speak for Paramount Title. We don't get in the middle. Hey, you guys just work it out amongst yourself. Tell us when you agree. And when money's going to sit there till the cows come home, right? And then at some point we get involved and say, why don't you just split the baby with the bathwater? You take half, you take half. And everybody seems to forget, but if you use the Beggins listing agreement, it says that we are entitled to 50% of all retained deposits. And nobody remembers that.
Oh,
So
I
let's
do.
say,
I've had it happen.
uh,
I, yeah,
I like getting it. It's kind of
yeah.
nice.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say there's a $10,000 deposit.
Mm-hmm.
The seller wants the $10,000. Well, the fellow was not entitled to 10,000. He's entitled to 5. So it's kind of easy. And oftentimes, as the broker, I'll say, I'm not going to fight for my half. I'll just give it up. So seller, you keep 5, give the buyer their 5 back, close the file, let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
my typical. I'm a lover, not a fighter when it comes to things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because the problem is, if the title company does want to proceed with what's called a interpleader, that's where they'll spend, and it's about $1,200 or $1,500 for the title company to file a claim with the court. It's basically a lawsuit, and then it has to go through the court docket, goes in front of the judge. Judge hears the information and says, based on my interpretation of the contract, escrow agent, you are authorized to release the deposit to buyer or seller.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's $10,000. Then they will say, it costs $1,500 to file the interpleader. So now there's only $8,500 left. Then the terms of the contract say the broker gets half. So now there's $4,250 left. And the buyer gets $4,250. Where if they just would have agreed to arbitrate with us in the beginning, they each would have gotten 5.
But I guess I'm confused because my understanding was the broker did not get half unless the seller got it back. Because if the buyer gets it back, those listing
Right,
brokers.
correct. No, you're
Okay,
100% right.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
only
No,
the
I
seller
just,
retains it.
yeah, okay. And then, so, okay, so
So a lot of time it's us just educating the buyer or the seller, say, look,
Mhm,
nobody's giving this money to anybody
mhm,
until the two of you agree.
mhm.
So the sooner you agree, the sooner we're going to get the money back. So if you want to be a jerk and claim 100%, it's a very loose system.
Yes. Well, I mean, at this point, no offense, but if this with the buyers that I have, I would take it to the court and lose $1,500 to him before I'd lose $1,500 to these sellers because they've just been so ridiculous and they lied.
Yeah.
You know, or honestly, it'd be better just to file suit on them for failure to disclose, and then per the FAR bar, let them pay all the attorney fees, and they walk away because I mean it's
Yeah.
in black and white that they lied.
Well, the FAR contract requires arbitration first,
Mm-hmm.
which is fair. So they arbitrate first and they'll get scared. And then you're right. If they're dead, if it's a lot of money, it's worth fighting for. If you're pretty sure the facts are there.
Yeah.
But a lot of times the facts are gray at best.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
The seller's just
There's,
pissed off and wants to be difficult, or the buyer's just pissed
Mhm.
off and wants to be difficult.
I
But
think
you're
yeah.
right.
Yeah, I think on this one it's the listing broker,
Oh
which
yeah,
is
the broker's
yeah.
getting involved and really piss everybody off.
Oh shit. Well, and I don't even know if they're talking to the sellers. That's the hard part. So
Right.
very frustrating.
Yeah, for me, I'm way too busy to get involved in escrow disputes. I just don't
Mm-hmm.
pay much attention. I
Yeah.
tell facts, this is what's going to happen. You had sent me an email the other day and we never really talked about it. I gave you an example, but one of your agents called and wanted to write a first refusal.
He was kind of exploring options because he was very in a situation he wasn't even sure if he wanted to deal with. So Thomas, his dad is a builder, and his dad doesn't mind building a spec home, but he really doesn't want to have to appease a buyer and let them pick out everything because you know how that can go. Excuse me. And so he was trying to look for, okay, if they wanted to write you know, we don't really want to go under contract with them right now because we don't want to have to deal with, oh, well, I didn't like this floor, etc. So he said, what if before we wrote an offer, we gave them the first right of, you know, or put it up on them, we gave them first right of refusal. So he was looking at that aspect of it, is why we were asking about that.
That
I
makes
don't,
sense.
yeah. But at the same time, he also said, I don't want to waste a lot of time on it because they haven't sent me a pre-approval.
Right.
And he hadn't told me the name of the lender. So it was more of just trying to explore an option. And we didn't have anything about our first right of refusal in dot loop. So of course I always like to get your and Jeff's opinion. And I know
Yeah.
Jeff is so busy trying to fight for Madeira Beach right now that, you know, and you just have a puppy. That's all, you know.
Well, what you could do there is just make a contract subject to the buyer's approval of the seller of the condition of the house by a period of time
Okay.
in the near future, and then say, I'm not happy. The builder wants to build the house without the seller, the buyer's input.
Right.
I want white cabinets. I want brown cabinets. He doesn't want to mess with any of that. He wants to build it the way he wants to build it. If the buyer likes it, what you should do is put a contract in, put some earnest money up, have an early out, you know, 30 days, 6 days before closing. it doesn't like it, then just don't buy it.
Okay.
No penalties.
Okay.
I had two more things I wanted to cover today.
Okay.
Um, just to come across my desk. One was procuring cause, and this is kind of tricky because you've been doing this long enough. Procuring cause used to be when the MLS was the offer of compensation, right?
Mm-hmm.
The listing broker said, "Hey, Leveda, if you show my listing, I promise I'll pay you."
Mm-hmm.
Right? And
Correct.
if you did the showing and all that other stuff and
Mm-hmm.
it closed, you got paid. Well, a lot of times buyers would walk away and say for some reason they didn't like you and they go to another agent, and
Yeah.
that other agent would show up or not even show up,
Mm-hmm.
write an offer on the house, and then close on it and get the commission.
Correct.
And then in this case, you as the example,
Mm-hmm.
go to the board and say, bullshit. I met
Mm-hmm.
John and Mary. I showed them the house. In many cases, I even wrote an offer because it didn't get accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes called a procuring cause battle. And it's an arbitrable thing in front of the board
Mm-hmm.
of your peers at the board. And it's annoying. It's time consuming. It's a heart jerking thing because everybody's emotions are high. And it's a pain in the ass. But now with buyer broker agreements, it all goes out the window
Mm-hmm.
because the buyer is promising to pay you. So if you're got a buyer broker agreement with the buyer and they decide to go buy a house with somebody else, they still owe you the money if you wrote your buyer broker agreement right.
Correct.
So this particular situation this was back in June. So way before the buyer broker agreement, August 17th settlement stuff came up. But the buyer's agent had a buyer broker agreement with their buyer. And then the buyer got in touch with one of our agents, and our agent put on a buyer broker agreement and sold them the house. And now they're coming after us for procuring cause. And I wrote the board and said, excuse me, how did this even make it past probable cause? The buyers that are complaining have a buyer broker agreement. They should seek restitution from their buyer, not from me.
Mm-hmm. Was it disclosed to them that there was a buyer broker agreement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think so.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Well, and so one of the things that I was always, when I started, was encouraged to do was to sit on grievance. And that is the best, if you're not involved at your association, everybody has their opinion, but grievance is wonderful because you want to learn what not to do. Go and read what some of these agents are doing. It will blow your mind and it will keep you out of trouble. Honestly, it will. The best way to learn is to learn from other people's mistakes. And so back in the day, you wouldn't have, but your offer of compensation was through MLS. So most people didn't do buyer brokerage agreements because, in all honesty, if I had a buyer that didn't want to work with me, please go on. You're not worth my stress.
Exactly.
Now, it took me several years in this industry and a lot of stress to learn that, but you're not for everybody. I'm sorry.
Right.
When you go to the coffee shop, you have your certain order. And that's how people feel about buyer's agents. I'm not for everybody. That's cool. I'm good with that. But now with the buyer brokerage agreement, and you still have agents showing houses without buyer brokerage agreements. We had it happen. Joe wrote a buyer broker agreement, got the buyer under contract with D.R. Horton. She wanted the next day or a couple days later to be. He said, I can't meet you at that time, but I can do this time. He didn't hear back from her. Next thing we find out, she wrote an offer with another brokerage. She's already under contract or one, but her daughter went and sent her to go talk to another agent. And she went under contract. That agent didn't have a buyer broker agreement.
Right.
So that was a friend of
Report
mine.
that agent, and there's a $1,500 automatic fine.
There is, or you can try to, it was when everything was still kind of newish, and it's one of the biggest brokerages in our town. They have 450 agents just themselves. I picked up the phone because technically I'm not a broker. I'm just a real estate agent. So I can call an agent and I said, hey, Vicky, I love you, girlfriend, but what did you do? And she said, what do you mean? And I said, well, you wrote a contract and you don't have a buyer brokerage agreement, and we do. And she said, oh, Leveda, I just met her there. I wasn't worried about it. I've been working with her daughter for forever. And I said, I get that, but what are we going to do about this money now? Because this is it's a foreign buyer. She's older, and I don't think she understands. So yes, we could punish her and we could create a horrible relationship, but we are in a very big but small town atmosphere. And if we get that reputation, it will not be good for us.
I agree with you.
We split it. I said, hey, let's just split the commission. It was a higher commission anyways, because it was a new build, and it pretty much came out pretty close to fair, but it was a lesson learned for her.
we're finding a lot of our agents are doing a lot of education.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
literally saying, we called one broker the other day, an agent, and they said, we said, what's your compensation agreement? He said, it's in the MLS.
No, it's not.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
What rock have you been hiding under?
They do. They don't. A lot of brokers, especially the transaction fee brokers, they're just getting
Mhm.
$3.95 off every deal. They're not worried about it. Their E&O is so weak, or they don't have any, that
Mhm.
they're not worried about it. They've got their head in a cloud. They think they're covered because they're under an LLC.
Yeah. Oh,
So
brother.
yeah.
All right. We're a little bit over time. I'm going to spend one more
Okay.
time. I just found this out the other day. Chris showed it to me. I'm
Okay.
just going to share it. It's not really relevant to you, thank goodness. That crazy
Oh
storm
God.
out there right now, it doesn't know what it's doing. It's
Hey,
just doing this.
I
But
was born and raised in Florida. I'm so used to this.
yeah, exactly. But this 50% rule is a big deal. And
Mm-hmm.
Hillsborough County, Pinellas County already had something. Hillsborough County just came out. I just want to show it real quick. I'm not going to spend much time on it at all. So move Zoom bar. Okay, so Hillsborough County Property Purchase website. When you come up here, there's a special new section. Here it is. Before I move. Come on. Come on. Come on. This is all good stuff, by the way. Every property, here you go. 50% rule information calculator. They finally put one up. So you come down here and you put in the folio number or the property address here. And I did that on this property in 724 Flamingo. And it comes right up real quick and says, for the purpose of FEMA's 50% rule, the value of the structure is 324. Therefore, based on the Hillsborough repairs and improvements can't exceed 162,000. They finally gave us something to look at, right? And that's a golf course house, right? 162. And then I looked at the house across the street, which is on the water, and that's a 434 structure, and they can spend 215. So it's a whole thing, and that they finally made it easy for us to give customers some advice and some
How,
valuations.
how valid do you feel like these numbers are, though?
Well, it's what the appraiser has. If you disagree, you can
Mm-hmm.
hire your own appraiser, and they can
Okay.
come up, and generally they'll come up higher.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Well, I
calling my
mean, yeah.
brother this morning because he lived in Houston and he had two homes, and they both flooded pretty bad. And he was able to get the insurance proceeds and sell the lot for market value and make more money than the house was worth before it flooded.
Wow.
So there's a lot of people out there trying to do different things, but I thought this is really cool that Hillsborough
Mm-hmm.
County finally did this. Pinellas County already has it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in Sarasota or Manatee, check with your property appraisers to see if they're getting up to speed too, because I thought that was really a cool tool to see how it works. So, because it is nerve wracking. And depending on, how much work needs to be done, $162,000 is a lot of money to replace cabinets and countertops and flooring
Mm-hmm.
and
Yes.
drywall. So most of those houses are not going to be non-repairable,
Mm-hmm.
but they are going to be in a position where they could flood again. And some people might just say, screw it, give me the
Mm-hmm.
insurance money, give me my land value, I'm out of here. So that's where we want to go. Well, anyway, thank you for your time today. I just wanted to
No,
come to
you're
get to know
welcome.
you. You're on the hot sheet all the time. They see your name. And thank you for all
Amen.
you do. You
Thank you.
guys, happy Friday. Have a great weekend. And
Bye,
hopefully
guys.
cool weather coming in. Thank you.
Bye.